5:01 p.m., February 27th. That is the deadline the U.S. Defense Secretary delivered to Anthropic. Grant the Pentagon unrestricted lawful use of its AI, or face the Defense Production Act, blacklisting, and a $200 million contract that would vanish. This pressure comes after Anthropic built its $380 billion reputation on saying no to military coercion and on drawing red lines no AI company had dared before. But now, as its safety promises quietly disappear and the clock runs out, only one question remains. Can any private company uphold real ethics in AI against the most powerful military in history, or is every safeguard just waiting to be erased? The standoff is still unfolding, and the outcome could decide who truly controls AI. Anthropic began in 2021 with a promise most tech companies would not dare make. Founded by Dario Amodei and a team of former OpenAI researchers, the company wrote its mission into law by registering as a public benefit corporation. The charter spelled out a duty to develop advanced AI for the long-term benefit of humanity, even if that meant slowing down in the face of risk. At the heart of Anthropic's identity was the responsible scaling policy called RSP. Its first version, released in September 2023, pledged a hard pause. If the company's models became more powerful than its safety controls, development would stop cold. No exceptions. This commitment went beyond public relations. It set a new bar for the industry, requiring not just Anthropic, but also its partners to match its standards. The company's technical approach, called constitutional AI, aimed to bake values like helpfulness and honesty directly into its flagship model, Claude. That reputation for principle paid off. By July 2025, Anthropic became the first AI lab cleared to operate on Pentagon classified networks, a milestone that unlocked a $200 million Department of Defense contract and signaled trust at the highest level. Investors followed, driving the company's valuation to $380 billion. And competitors scrambled to keep up with its safety-first image. But every safeguard carried a cost. Board minutes and policy drafts reveal the internal debate. Could Anthropic hold the line on safety while rivals raced ahead, and while military contracts demanded more? The answer, for a time, was yes. The hard pause clause stood as a red line, promising that no amount of money or pressure could force the company to cross it. That line would soon be tested in ways no one at Anthropic could have predicted. In January 2026, a classified U.S. military operation in Venezuela set off a chain reaction that no one inside Anthropic could have predicted. According to multiple media reports, the Pentagon, working through Palantir's secure networks, deployed Anthropic's Claude model to help coordinate the capture of Nicolas Maduro. The details of the mission remain under lock and key, but what is clear is that Claude operated as the first large language model cleared for use on Pentagon classified systems, a direct result of Anthropic's $200 million defense contract and its reputation for safety. After the operation, an Anthropic employee submitted an internal query about how the model had been used. The question was simple. Did this deployment cross any of the company's red lines, specifically its bans on autonomous lethal targeting and mass domestic surveillance? Palantir, bound by its own reporting protocols, flagged the inquiry to Pentagon officials. That single act turned a technical partnership into a flashpoint. Within days, the Pentagon's leadership interpreted the internal question as a sign of resistance. What had started as a routine vendor check quickly escalated into a confrontation over control. Palantir's integration of Claude, once a symbol of trust, now raised alarms about just how much power Anthropic could exercise over military operations. As the Pentagon's frustration grew, the company's responsible scaling policy, once a badge of honor, became a liability. Behind closed doors, the question was no longer whether Anthropic's safety commitments protected the public, but whether they threatened U.S. national security. The clock began ticking toward 5:01 p.m. on February 27th, when the government would demand a final answer. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth did not mince words. On February 24, 2026, he confronted Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei in a closed-door meeting that lasted just under an hour. The message was blunt. By 5:01 p.m. on Friday, February 27th, Anthropic must comply with all lawful Pentagon uses of its Claude model, or the government would bring the full weight of its arsenal to bear. The ultimatum spelled out 3 threats, each with sweeping consequences. First, Hegseth invoked the Defense Production Act, a Cold War-era law more often used to commandeer steel or semiconductors than to force the hand of a Silicon Valley AI lab. Under the Defense Production Act, the Pentagon could compel Anthropic to prioritize military orders, override its internal policies, and even dictate the terms of its product releases. Second, the Department of Defense threatened to designate Anthropic a national security supply chain risk. This move, modeled after the blacklisting of Huawei, would bar not only the Pentagon, but every federal agency and prime contractor, including Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon, from touching Anthropic's technology. The ripple effects would stretch far beyond defense, freezing the company out of the U.S. government supply chain overnight. The third threat was immediate: the cancellation of Anthropic's $200 million prototype contract for classified AI development. This agreement, signed just 7 months earlier, had made Anthropic the first AI company cleared for Pentagon classified networks. Now, with a single letter, that contract and the privileged access it represented stood on the verge of being erased. As the 5:01 p.m. deadline approached, the Pentagon's legal team circulated draft blacklists and Defense Production Act enforcement checklists to major contractors. Internal emails show outreach to Boeing and Lockheed, warning them to prepare for a swift pivot in sourcing if Anthropic refused to comply. In the background, the message was clear. No private company, no matter how trusted, could set the terms for the U.S. military. The clock was ticking. Anthropic's position came down to 2 lines it refused to cross. The first was no use of its AI for autonomous lethal targeting. No algorithm would ever make the final decision to kill without a human in the loop. The second was no mass domestic surveillance, especially against U.S. citizens. These boundaries weren't just marketing. They were written into contracts, echoed in every interview, and enforced across all deployments, military or civilian. In December, Dario Amodei and his leadership team offered what they saw as a reasonable compromise. Claude could help with missile defense, cyber operations, even battlefield logistics, but not with any system that would select or strike targets autonomously or enable sweeping surveillance at home. The Pentagon rejected these limits outright. Officials insisted that any restriction, even for safety, amounted to an unacceptable veto over lawful military operations. Amodei stood firm. He argued that AI hallucinations made fully autonomous weapons fundamentally unsafe, and that mass surveillance crossed a moral line no contract could erase. With the Pentagon unmoved and the deadline approaching, Anthropic's red lines became the last defense against a sweeping demand for unrestricted use. On February 24, 2026, Anthropic released Responsible Scaling Policy 3.0. Gone was the hard pause, the promise to stop scaling AI if safety could not keep up. In its place, the new policy spoke of roadmaps, risk reports, and mitigation plans, but it left the door open for continued development even as risks mounted. The flagship safety pledge vanished without fanfare. The company's chief science officer, Jared Kaplan, later told Time, "A hard pause sounds good on paper, but in practice, it would lock us out of critical defense work and let less careful competitors take the lead." The timing was impossible to ignore. Days before the Pentagon's deadline, Anthropic's most public commitment dissolved. In the same week, OpenAI's blog doubled down on its own hard safety pause, while Google DeepMind touted its robust alignment framework. xAI, meanwhile, announced it would comply with all lawful government requests. For the first time, Anthropic's policy no longer set the industry bar. The company that had once raced to the top on safety now found itself recalibrating in the shadow of a government ultimatum. Anthropic's retreat from its hard pause has already sent shockwaves through the AI world, but the larger question now hangs over every lab and boardroom. What happens when safety policies collide with government power? Legal experts warn that compliance under the Defense Production Act could erase the very concept of enforceable ethical boundaries in private AI. If the Pentagon's demand for unrestricted lawful use stands, every future contract may come with a waiver, turning today's exception into tomorrow's industry standard. Policy analysts point to the risk of a precedent. Once a single company's guardrails fall under government pressure, rivals may see little reason to hold the line. Investors, too, are watching for signals that safety pledges are negotiable, not binding. The stakes go far beyond Anthropic's $200 million contract or its public benefit charter. This is a test case for who gets to decide the limits of powerful AI, corporate boards, regulators, or the national security state. As the deadline passes and legal challenges loom, the unresolved question remains. Can any private company uphold ethical red lines when the world's most powerful military is on the other side of the table? The answer will shape not just Anthropic's future, but the rules for AI everywhere. Tonight, Anthropic's red lines face the full weight of the Defense Production Act. Responsible scaling policy 3.0 now echoes Pentagon priorities, not private promises. The real question, can any company draw boundaries when national security demands the eraser? As this standoff unfolds, the future of AI ethics hangs in the balance.